August 6, 2024, 5 a.m., Kursk Oblast, Russia. 79 years after Soviet forces defeated Nazi Germany in this region, Ukrainian forces crossed the border. Not a raid, not a reconnaissance mission, an invasion. 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers, hundreds of armored vehicles, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery, air defense, engineering units, electronic warfare, a combined arms formation, executing a planned offensive into Russia. The Russian border guards are overwhelmed, outnumbered, outgunned. They call for reinforcement. None comes immediately. Russian units in Kursk are minimal. Border security, local police, National Guard, not frontline military, not prepared for mechanized assault. By noon, Ukrainian forces penetrate 20 kilometers into Russian territory, capturing villages, destroying checkpoints, advancing rapidly. Russian civilians evacuate, panic. Roads jammed, 200,000 people flee. The Russian Ministry of Defense issues statements. Terrorist attack repelled. Situation under control. Both are lies. Ukrainian forces continue advancing. August 7th, 40 kilometers deep. August 8th, Sudzha captured, a town of 5,000. Now Ukrainian controlled, inside Russia. This is WarFist TV, where we analyze the battles that change wars. Because the Kursk incursion wasn't just a military operation, it was a psychological earthquake. Russia's border was inviolable. Their territory was safe. Ukraine was on defense. All assumptions shattered in 72 hours. Hit subscribe. You need to see how Ukraine invaded Russia and held territory for months. The planning for Kursk began months earlier. Ukrainian Military Intelligence, Main Intelligence Directorate, GUR, led by Kirilo Budanov. They identified vulnerabilities. Russian border defenses in Kursk Oblast were minimal. Most Russian forces deployed in occupied Ukraine, attacking, defending, none protecting the border. Why would they? Ukraine was defensive, retreating in Donbas, struggling in Kherson. Nobody expected Ukrainian offensive into Russia. The assumption was fatal. Ukrainian planners saw opportunity. Strategic objectives were multiple. First, diversion. Pull Russian forces from Donbas. Relieve pressure on Pokrovsk and other frontline cities. Second, territory for negotiation. Capture Russian land. Use as bargaining chip in future talks. Trade Russian territory for Ukrainian territory. Third, psychological impact. Shatter Russian narrative of inevitable victory. Show Russian civilians the war affects them too. Fourth, morale. Ukrainian forces needed a victory, something positive, offensive success instead of defensive grinding. The units selected were elite. 82nd Air Assault Brigade, 61st Mechanized Brigade, 22nd Mechanized Brigade. Others, best trained, best equipped, Western armor, Bradley fighting vehicles, Stryker armored personnel carriers, Leopard tanks, Challenger tanks, Ukrainian T-64s and T-80s. Artillery included M777 howitzers, Caesar self-propelled guns, HIMARS rocket systems, air defense, Gepard, Stinger, covering the advance, electronic warfare units to disrupt Russian communications, drone operators, TB2, FPV kamikaze drones, reconnaissance quadcopters, engineers with mine-clearing equipment, bridging equipment, medical support, logistics, fuel trucks, ammunition carriers. This was not improvised. This was planned combined arms operation. The training occurred in western Ukraine, away from Russian observation, rehearsals, coordination drills, communications protocols. Operational security was tight. Few knew the target, need-to-know basis. Even frontline units learned details days before. Which Kursk objective had greatest strategic value? A. Diverting Russian forces. B. Negotiation leverage. C. Psychological impact. Comment your answer. August 6th, 5 a.m. Operation begins. Ukrainian artillery fires. Counter-battery suppression. Russian border posts struck. Silenced. Armored columns cross border. Multiple points. Spreading Russian response. Lead elements are reconnaissance. Identifying Russian positions. Calling artillery and airstrikes. Main force follows. Tanks, infantry fighting vehicles. Advancing at speed. Russian border guards attempt resistance. Small arms fire. Anti-tank missiles. Ineffective against massed armor. Ukrainian forces bypass strong points. Encircle them. Continue advancing. The doctrine is deep operations. Soviet theory. Penetrate enemy lines. Exploit breakthrough. Don't stop for isolated resistance. By 9 a.m., Ukrainian forces are 15 kilometers into Russia. Russian forces scramble, helicopters, ground attack aircraft, attempt to slow advance. Ukrainian air defense engages, Stinger missiles, Gepard guns. Several Russian aircraft shot down. The air threat diminishes. Russian ground reinforcements are distant. Nearest mechanized units are 300 kilometers away. In occupied Ukraine, they must disengage, load onto transporters, drive north, takes days. Local Russian forces are insufficient. National Guard, Rosgvardia, light infantry, armed police. No armor, no heavy weapons. They establish checkpoints, man roadblocks. Ukrainian armor bypasses or destroys them. August 7th, Ukrainian forces reach 30 kilometers penetration, capturing more villages. Russian civilians flee. The scenes are broadcast. Russian state television cannot hide it. Footage shows Russian refugees fleeing Ukrainian advance. The irony is thick. Russians fleeing Ukrainians. In Russia, the propaganda impact is devastating. Russian civilians believed Putin's narrative. Special military operation going according to plan. No threat to Russia. Now, Ukrainian tanks are 20 kilometers from Kursk city. The narrative collapses. Stay with me. What happens over the next weeks proves Ukraine can execute complex operations while defending elsewhere. August 8th, Sudzha falls, a significant town, 5,000 population, administrative center, gas metering station for Russian gas exports to Europe, captures intact. Ukrainian forces control Russian gas infrastructure. Irony compounds. Ukrainian soldiers stand in town square, raise Ukrainian flag, post videos. Russian propaganda claims it's staged. Satellite imagery confirms. Ukrainian control is real. August 10th, Ukrainian penetration reaches maximum extent, approximately 1,200 square kilometers of Russian territory, 100 plus villages and towns. The front stabilizes. Russian reinforcements arrive. 51st Airborne Regiment, elements of 76th Guards Air Assault. Other units, they establish defensive lines. The Ukrainian advance slows, not from Russian resistance, from operational planning. Ukraine did not intend to drive to Moscow. The objective was limited incursion. Seize territory, hold it, force Russian response. The Russian counteroffensive begins mid-August. Conscript units, newly mobilized, poorly trained, they attack, predictably, frontally. Ukrainian defenders use prepared positions, anti-tank missiles, artillery, FPV drones. Russian casualties are heavy. Little progress made. Russia tries different approach, flanking attacks, attempting to cut Ukrainian supply lines. Ukraine anticipated this. Defensive positions on flanks, engineer units fortifying, mine barriers, tank ditches. The flanking attacks fail. September 2024. Russian forces stabilize front, but do not recapture territory. Ukraine holds approximately 800 square kilometers, reduced from maximum but still substantial. Russian forces commit more units, pull from other fronts. Donbas offensive slows, fewer Russian attacks. Ukrainian goal achieved, diversion successful. The fighting in Kursk differs from Donbas. Open terrain, maneuver warfare. Neither side has extensive fortifications yet. Armor duels, artillery exchanges, drone warfare. Both sides employ FPV kamikaze drones heavily, hundreds daily. Tanks are primary targets, Ukrainian Leopards, Russian T-72s and T-90s. Both sides lose armor. The advantage shifts based on tactics. Ukrainian forces use combined arms effectively. Infantry supports armor. Air defense protects concentrations. Electronic warfare disrupts Russian drones. Russian forces often operate independently. Tanks without infantry, infantry without armor support. Coordination is poor. Results reflect this. Ukrainian forces inflict disproportionate casualties, not overwhelmingly, but measurably. Estimated exchange ratio, 2 Russian casualties for 1 Ukrainian. In equipment, similar. Russian losses slightly higher. If holding enemy territory changes negotiating power, type WarFist TV in the comments. The occupation administration Ukraine establishes is minimal. Military commandant's office, civil affairs teams, humanitarian aid for civilians who stayed, medical care, food distribution, restoration of basic services. Ukraine is not annexing territory, not claiming it permanently, but administration is necessary. prevents chaos, maintains order, allows governance. Russian civilians remaining in Ukrainian-controlled areas number in hundreds, mostly elderly, cannot evacuate or chose not to. Ukrainian forces treat them correctly, documented by international observers. Red Cross, UN, no mass abuses reported. Some property damage from combat, but no systematic targeting of civilians. Contrast with Russian occupation of Ukrainian territory. Torture, executions, deportations. The difference is stark. The strategic impact of Kursk operation exceeded expectations. Military impact. Russia diverted 30,000 troops to Kursk, pulled from Donbas and Zaporizhia. Ukrainian defenders in those regions reported decreased Russian attacks. Breathing room, ability to fortify, rotate units. Kursk achieved its primary military goal. Political impact. International perception shifted. Ukraine demonstrated offensive capability, not just defense, can plan and execute complex operations. Western allies gained confidence, continued support justified. Russian population shocked, war came home. Putin's approval ratings dipped, briefly but measurably. Negotiation leverage, 800 square kilometers, is bargaining chip. Russia wants it back. Ukraine can trade. Return our territory, we return yours. Simple, fair. Russia refuses so far, but the option exists. The challenges Ukraine faces in Kursk are real. Logistics, supplying forces across border is complex. Long supply lines, Russian strikes on logistics routes, electronic warfare disrupting communications. Ukraine manages, but with difficulty. Attrition, holding territory requires forces not available for defense elsewhere. Pokrovsk and other Donbas cities face increased Russian pressure. Trade-off is painful but calculated. Winter, approaching cold changes operations, mud, frozen ground, supply challenges intensify. Can Ukrainian forces hold through winter? Remains to be seen. Russian determination. Putin cannot accept Ukrainian forces on Russian soil indefinitely. Political cost is too high. Russia will continue attempting to recapture territory. The pressure will not relent. Answer. All three objectives have value, but B. Negotiation leverage may prove most durable. Diversion worked but is temporary. Russia adapts. Psychological impact fades as Russian propaganda adjusts narratives, but territory is tangible, physical. Held ground can be traded. Future negotiations require compromise. Ukraine holding Russian land creates symmetry. You leave ours, we leave yours. This is leverage that persists. International reaction was mixed. Ukraine's allies, cautious support. United States did not publicly encourage the operation, but did not condemn it. Continued supplying weapons. Germany expressed concern about escalation, but maintained support. Poland enthusiastically backed it. Historical reasons. Seeing Russian territory invaded carries particular satisfaction. Russia's allies, Lukashenko of Belarus, warned of intervention. Empty threat. Belarus lacks capability and will. China called for restraint. Neutral positioning. North Korea condemned Ukraine. Iran supported Russia verbally. Russia's reaction. Fury, demands for escalation, nuclear threats, rhetoric, but no action beyond conventional military response. The red lines Russia drew proved meaningless. Again. The future of Kursk operation is uncertain. Ukraine may hold territory through winter, possibly into 2025, or Russia may recapture it through sustained offensive, or negotiation may resolve it. Some scenarios, frozen conflict, front line stabilizes, neither side advances. Territory remains Ukrainian-controlled indefinitely, like Transnistria or Nagorno-Karabakh before 2020. Negotiated withdrawal, peace talks. Ukraine trades Kursk for Crimea or Donbas. Seems unlikely but possible. Russian recapture, sustained offensive, heavy casualties. Russia retakes territory, Pyrrhic victory, expanded operation. Ukraine pushes deeper into Russia. Belgorod next? Seems unlikely. Resources are limited. Current gains are enough. Should Ukraine have invaded Russia sooner? Can they hold Kursk long term? Will this territory matter in negotiations? Comment your strategic assessment. Subscribe to WarFist TV. We analyze the operations that redefine wars. The Kursk incursion changed everything, not the war's outcome necessarily. That remains undecided. but the perception, the narrative, the psychology. Russia is not invulnerable. Their border is not inviolable. Their territory is not safe. Ukraine is not defeated, not desperate, not collapsed. Ukraine plans, executes, succeeds. 10,000 soldiers crossed into Russia, captured 1,200 square kilometers, held it for months, forced Russian response, diverted their forces, achieved strategic objectives, and reminded the world that in war, initiative matters. Aggression can be met with aggression. Invasion can be answered with invasion. The assumptions that governed this war for 2.5 years shattered in August 2024 because Ukrainian forces decided to stop playing defense, and in 72 hours proved that Russia's greatest weakness is their arrogance. They never believed Ukraine would dare. They were wrong. Stay vigilant.